As I was performing oral sex on him, he began to thrust himself inside my mouth really hard. And I told him that that was hurting. Then he grabbed my hair. I had long hair, and he wrapped my hair around his hand and he started yanking it. And when he wasn't thrusting himself in my mouth, he was pulling my hair really hard. And with his other hand, he would just hit me and hit me and hit me. And I was like, it's hurting. And he was like, you better not bite me. You better not bite me.
That's Latoshia Daniels on the witness stand, describing what happened March 15th, 2019, 3 weeks before she walked into Pastor Brodus Perry's home and shot him 5 times. This is the story of how a counseling session with a pastor turned into a 2-year affair, how that affair turned violent, and how it all ended with a dead pastor, a wounded wife, and a woman on trial for murder. April 4th, 2019, Collierville, Tennessee. Latoshia drove 2.5 hours from Arkansas and showed up at the Perry home at 10 p.m. The pastor's wife, Tabitha, answered the door and let her in. They were friends. They'd played tennis together, went to church together. What Tabitha didn't know, her husband had been sleeping with Latoshia for 2 years. What Latoshia didn't know, everything the pastor told her about his wife being okay with it was a lie. 20 minutes after she arrived, gunshots rang out. Pastor Perry hit 5 times, dead on the living room floor. Tabitha shot in the shoulder. And Latoshia, standing there saying over and over, "You broke my heart." Police arrived. Pastor Perry did not survive. Now she's on trial for first-degree murder. The prosecution says she planned it, bought the gun that afternoon, drove with murder on her mind, executed him in cold blood. The defense says she was a victim, manipulated and destroyed by a man who used his position as a pastor to control her, hurt her, and push her to a breaking point. The jury heard it all, the testimony, the videos where Pastor Perry discusses having multiple girlfriends like it's normal, the evidence of manipulation and lies. And they had to decide, was this premeditated murder, or did a broken woman finally snap? Before the headlines, before the murder trial, Latoshia Daniels was just another woman of faith from Little Rock, Arkansas. She worked a 9 to 5. She even flipped burgers at Wendy's while studying to become a social worker. She was loyal to her church, St. Mark Baptist Church, on South University Avenue, always at Bible study, always volunteering. But what nobody saw was the battle between her faith and her pain. Latoshia had spent her entire life surrounded by men who hurt women. Her father was a minister, well respected in the community, but behind closed doors, he beat her mother. And Latoshia, just a little girl, would lie awake at night with her 2 younger sisters, listening to it happen. At 17, Latoshia got pregnant. Her father forced her to marry. She married a man named Rodney. When Rodney eventually cheated on her, Latoshia felt like a failure. That's when she first tried to take her own life. Her second marriage was to a man named Brian. He wasn't physically aggressive, but he completely shut her out emotionally. Every day, she'd come home and sit in the driveway, crying before she walked inside. 8 years of feeling invisible in her own home. Finally, Latoshia couldn't take it anymore. She tried to get Brian to go to marriage counseling with her. He refused. So she decided she needed spiritual guidance. Brodus Perry was an assistant pastor at St. Mark Baptist Church in Little Rock, one of the biggest Baptist churches in the city. He was educated, a therapist, a pastor over the couples ministry. He was married to Tabitha, a hospital administrator. They looked like the perfect couple. So when Latoshia's relationship was falling apart, she turned to him for guidance. She trusted him. In 2016, after her fallout with Brian, Latoshia scheduled a counseling session with Pastor Perry. She opened up, told him about the infidelity in her past marriage, the loneliness, the confusion. She cried for almost 2 hours, and instead of keeping it spiritual, he crossed the line.
Several weeks had passed and she was still struggling with these feelings, and so she reached out for a second session. And when she talked to Pastor Perry at the beginning, she said, "I appreciate you meeting with me, but I don't understand why when we met, you had your hands shoved in your jacket the whole time I was talking to you. Pastor Perry told her that he was doing that so that he could maintain his professionalism. As she was pouring her heart out to him, all he could do was think about sleeping with her. And when this counseling session started, within minutes, he grabbed her chair, pulled her to him, and began kissing her. And this woman who had been so starved for love and affection is finally receiving that. She did not seek it out, but she was receiving it. And that session that was supposed to be counseling her through her divorce became the first time that Latoshia Daniels and Brodus Perry had sex.
That was the beginning. Immediately after that, Brodus and Latoshia started a relationship, but there were rules. She had to download the Confide app, just like Snapchat. Messages disappear after you read them. That was the only way she was allowed to communicate with him. When the church traveled for conferences and trips, Latoshia had to come along. She paid her own way, but she was expected to be there. And when they stayed in hotel rooms together, Latoshia was required to be naked at all times. If she put on clothing, he'd get angry with her. He went so far as to tell her, "If I ever have a medical emergency when we're together, do not call 911. Call Pastor Pointer. He'll handle it. If you don't, get as far away from me as possible so nobody finds out about this." By the end of their relationship, one of the rules was that Latoshia had to answer him with "Yes, sir," or "No, sir." She'd fallen so deeply in love with him after being starved in her previous relationships that she was willing to follow any rule. She loved him, but there was guilt, there was shame, because Latoshia knew Tabitha. They were friends. They played tennis together once a week, and Brodus was married. That's when Brodus introduced Latoshia to a concept called ethical non-monogamy. He told her that as long as everyone in the relationship is informed and honest, you can have relationships outside of marriage. He told her this was a lifestyle he wanted, and he told her that Tabitha would allow him to have it. He told Latoshia, "You and Tabitha will be sister wives. You will live with us. We will have a life together. I just haven't told her yet, but I will." So despite the guilt and the shame, Latoshia stayed. Brodus made her read a book called The Ethical Slut, the guidebook for ethical non-monogamy. He created a chat group with 2 other women where they discussed this book for hours. Video chats about how Tabitha was so on board with his lifestyle that when he said he wanted to be with Latoshia, Tabitha said, "You should do it with her. She's your person. Let me talk to her. I'll break the ice." He told these women that Tabitha was completely involved, that she'd even picked Latoshia herself. None of why it was true. Tabitha had no idea her husband was in this relationship for 2 years. Despite all the lies, despite the secrecy, Latoshia and Brodus had what looked like a real relationship. They saw each other almost every day. She cooked lunch for him. He had the code to her office, so he'd just come in, grab his food, warm it up, and wait for her if she was in a session. They took trips together. She bought him expensive gifts. They started drinking bourbon together, going to cigar lounges. They joined a biking group. They'd run together. It was a full relationship, and Latoshia believed Tabitha knew about all of it. Then, towards the end of 2018, Brodus Perry got offered a position at Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church in Memphis, Tennessee. A big church, a prestigious position. He talked to Latoshia about whether he should accept it. She told him yes. This was a huge opportunity for him. Latoshia even organized the going-away party for Brodus and Tabitha. She planned a party at the cigar lounge. She planned a party at the church. She paid for most of the gifts, and Brodus gave her instructions on how to get money from other church members. He told her, "Reach out to the life groups. Tell them I'm going away and we're doing monetary gifts." She did. He got the money. After Brodus moved to Memphis in October 2018, he'd still come back to Little Rock. He still had his orthodontist there, getting his braces tightened. And when he came to town, he and Latoshia would pick up right where they left off. But things started to change in the way he treated her. March 15th, 2019. Brodus came to Little Rock. He texted Latoshia to meet him at the hotel.
The first time I went to the hotel, it was, just a drop off. He had asked me to bring him, to go buy him something to eat and to stop by and get him some bourbon. After I brought that to him, we made an agreement to meet up later on. I had called him and as it was getting later and say, hey, what time are we going to meet up? And he was just like, I don't know, I'll let you know. But he never called. So I was at home and I was like, I'm just gonna break up with him. Like I'm not gonna do this treatment. Like no. I went to the lounge. I still had some gifts to give him, and he was coming out. And I said, unlock your car, and I started putting in the gifts in. Well, once he got closer to me, he just hugged me and gave me the key to the room and was like, go to the room. So I was like, okay, and I did.
And once he hugged you, was it all better?
It was.
Is that kind of how it went with Brodus?
Yes.
So tell me about what happened after that.
That was one of the times that I still had my clothes on. So of course, when he got in there, he's like, why you still got clothes on? And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I got undressed. I did tell him, I said, I was coming to break up with you because of the way you're treating me. And he laughed it off and was like, well, why didn't you? And I was like, because I really do love you. He came over to the bed, started tickling me. We laughed it off. And then as we began to engage in what I thought was going to be lovemaking, was not that night.
What happened next was different. It was violent. It was degrading.
As I was performing oral sex on him, he began to thrust himself inside my mouth really hard. And I told him that was hurting. Then he grabbed my hair. I had long hair, and he wrapped my hair around his hand and he started yanking it. And when he wasn't thrusting himself in my mouth, he was pulling my hair really hard. And with his other hand, he would just hit me and hit me and hit me. And I was like, this is hurting. And he was like, you better not bite me. You better not bite me. And then after that, we had sex, and it was just rough, and it was hard, and it was just not what I was used to. And then once we finished, something he never ever does was he rolled over and just gave me the cold shoulder, and I was like, you're not gonna hold me? And he was like, no, and just went to sleep.
How did that make you feel?
I felt so used.
The next morning, Brodus got up and started getting dressed. Usually they showered together, but not that day.
And that morning he got up and he left. He was getting dressed, and I was like, where are you going? Like, we always shower together. And he was like, and I was like, where are you going with still smelling like me? And he was like, none of your business. I was like, since when did you not tell me your schedule? And he left. Well, he was getting ready to leave. So I got up and I got dressed. And as I got dressed, I grabbed the key card for the room off the thing. And he laughed it off, and I left. And later on, I texted and said, hey, are we meeting up again? And he was like, I'll let you know. Of course, the day went on. I had rearranged everything, thinking that he was going to end up we would see each other earlier that day, but I didn't. And so that night, when I still didn't hear from him, I decided to head to the room. And as I was going, he was there. But in my wanting to head to the room, I had made the decision that I was going to kill myself in front of him, because I just wanted him to feel the pain that he was causing me. So when we got in the room, he was already in there by the time I parked and got in. And I pulled out my gun and I told him, "You about to feel the same pain that you've been giving me."
Did you ever threaten him?
No.
Did you threaten yourself?
I told him I was going to kill myself.
What did he do?
He began to tell me no, and he kept saying that he loved me and that we can fix it. And I was just like, "No, you're treating me so bad." And he was just like, "That's not, I love you, I love you." And eventually he talked me into putting the gun on the counter and coming over and sitting and talking to him.
Did that restore a reason for you to live in that moment?
It did.
Brodus convinced her to put the gun down. He told her he loved her, that they could fix things, that everything would be okay. But he didn't take the gun away from her. He left it on the counter. It wasn't until she tried to leave that he pushed her out of the way and grabbed it himself. He made her promise to meet him the next morning at the cigar lounge. Later, she found out he'd hidden the gun in a locker there. After that night, Latoshia knew she needed time away. She went to stay with a friend in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, about 45 minutes away. Her friend was a therapist. She told her she just needed someone to watch her. She was desperate. Over the next few weeks, she and Brodus spoke, but only limited contact. When she got back to Little Rock, they resumed their relationship, but everything was different now. April 4th, 2019. Latoshia woke up and sent Brodus her usual good morning text. No response. Later that afternoon, she saw that he'd finally replied. She opened the Confeed app. The message said, "I think our time is up." Then it disappeared. He broke up with her through a disappearing text message.
I felt so used and worthless, and I just felt like trash. Like, who does that to somebody who they say that they love?
You're a How did you react after you read that?
I wrote a letter. I wrote a suicide note to my family, because I was just like, I'm tired. I'm tired of the pain. I'm tired of it all. And I just wanted I wanted the pain to end. So I wrote a note and made a plan to take my life.
Around 3 o'clock that afternoon, Latoshia wrote a letter to her family. She didn't take her purse. She took her license and left it in the car. Around 4 o'clock that afternoon, she went and bought a gun. She'd chosen a place in Jacksonville, Arkansas to go, a place that meant something to her. But as she was driving down the interstate, she kept thinking, if I could just see him, if I could just talk to him, even if we're ending, we can be okay again. This doesn't have to happen. I just need to see him one more time. She looked up and saw the exit to Memphis. Latoshia found herself in downtown Memphis, a place she wasn't familiar with. But she knew one thing. On Thursday nights, Brodus would be at the cigar lounge, so she went there. As she was walking up to the entrance, Brodus walked out. But Latoshia knew her rules. She wasn't allowed to approach him. She had to wait for him to approach her. He had to say her name first, so she'd know it was safe to talk to him. So she saw him and walked directly past him, waiting. "Latoshia," he said it. She came back. They talked.
She was telling him how heartbroken she was. And he said, "It doesn't make any sense that my wife is okay with me having other women, but my girlfriend isn't." And she said, I'll be okay with it. You can do it. If that will fix it, I will do that. We'll give you that. And just like she had so many times in this relationship with him pressuring her to get a watcher or to have a threesome or to engage in this ethical non-monogamy.
She was begging him, telling him she'd be okay with him having other women. If that's what it took to keep him, she'd do anything. But the conversation didn't end the way she hoped. Eventually, they went their separate ways that night, and Latoshia, heartbroken and lost, drove to the Perry home in Collierville. It was around 10 p.m. when she knocked on the door. Tabitha Perry answered. She saw Latoshia standing there and invited her inside. They were friends. Latoshia came inside. She and Tabitha sat and talked for a while. Just casual conversation. Old memories. Catching up. Then Brodus came home. The three of them talked for a few more minutes. Small talk. Nothing seemed wrong. Then Latoshia said, "Well, I'm gonna leave. Don't want to bother y'all anymore." Brodus and Tabitha started walking her to the door, and that's when everything changed.
He hadn't been here at the church long, but we do know last night he was at a Collierville apartment complex with his wife and another woman. That other woman, police say, opened fire on the couple, killing Perry. And tonight, this large church community is coping with the consequences.
911 calls, possible gunshots.
It didn't take long for the calls to start coming in. Commotion inside a unit at the usually quiet Meridian Park Apartments in Collierville Thursday night.
Maybe a female crying and some others screaming.
When police got there around 10:20, they found a man and woman with gunshot wounds.
Latoshia pulled out the gun she'd purchased that afternoon. She fired 1 shot, 2, 3, 4, 5. Brodus Perry fell to the floor, bleeding, dying. Tabitha was shot in the shoulder. She dropped, trying to help her husband, trying to stop the bleeding, begging Latoshia to stop. But Latoshia stood over Brodus and kept saying the same thing over and over. "You broke my heart. You broke my heart. You broke my heart." Tabitha, wounded and terrified, ran out of the apartment to get help. When she came back inside, Latoshia was reloading the gun. Police arrived within minutes. They saw Latoshia with the weapon. They ordered her to drop it. Brodus Perry was pronounced dead at the scene. 36 years old, Tabitha survived her injuries. Latoshia Daniels was charged with first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, resisting arrest, and assaulting a police officer. She pleaded not guilty.
Not only have we experienced the death of Brodus Perry to violence, but the rumors swelling around his murder leave us shocked and shaken. To those of you who are wondering, how could this happen? How could this happen within our safe and loving church community? To those of you in particular who came to know him as I did during the 5 months he was at Mississippi Boulevard, I want to say, I'm heavy-hearted because of your pain.
The church was devastated. Brodus had only been at Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church for 5 months. He was respected, loved. He led the couple's ministry, and now he was dead. The rumors started immediately. Who was this woman? Why did she do it? Was there an affair? Tabitha told police she was unaware of any relationship between her husband and Latoshia, but she believed Latoshia's actions suggested it was a possibility. The case sat for 6 years before it finally went to trial in November 2025.
Brodus Perry was a pastor of a church. He was a husband, and he was a man who enjoyed life. He was 36 years old at the time of his death. He wasn't perfect. He had flaws, much like a lot of people have flaws. In the fall of 2016, he was one of the pastors at a church in Little Rock. He knew the defendant through his role at that church. She was a member of the church, and I believe she was a leader of a life group in that church. She was going through a divorce or had recently divorced. They talked about that. A sexual relationship between the two of them began sometime around February of 2017. And you'll hear that that relationship went on until sometime the end of 2018 or maybe even going into 2019. Went on for several years. On April the 4th of 2019, the defendant left Little Rock. She stopped at a gun store in Sherwood, Arkansas, where she purchased a Ruger 9mm handgun, and she purchased ammunition. and she drove the 2.5 or 3 hours from there to Carterville, Tennessee, where she showed up somewhere 9, 10 o'clock that night at Mr. and Miss Perry's residence. Mr. Perry wasn't there, but Miss Perry let her in. And they sat and talked for a while until Mr. Perry came in. They talked for a few minutes more, and she said, well, I'm going to leave. Don't want to bother y'all anymore. Mr. and Miss Perry were about to walk her out the door when the defendant pulled the 9mm handgun that she had purchased 3 or 4 hours earlier. And she shot Mr. Perry multiple times. The medical examiner will testify they pulled 5 bullets out of his body. She also shot Tabitha Perry as she was kneeling beside her husband, trying to get him to quit, trying to help him, and trying to get the defendant to quit shooting. She had all kind of time to think about what she was doing. At the end of the proof, we're going to ask you to find her guilty as indicted in counts 1, 2, and 3 of the indictment.
The prosecution's case was simple. Latoshia bought a gun. She drove hours to Memphis. She planned this. She walked into that apartment with murder on her mind. Premeditated. First degree. But the defense had a completely different story. The defense wasn't denying that Latoshia shot Brodus Perry. They were saying she was a victim, a broken woman who'd been manipulated and controlled by a man who used his position as a pastor to prey on the vulnerable. But the most shocking evidence in the trial came from Brodus Perry himself. Videos he'd recorded. Videos where he discussed his relationships, his ethical non-monogamy, his lies. The jury watched these videos, and they heard Tabitha deny everything he said in them.
Your opinion matters to me because we are in this relationship, but at the same time, like I said from the outset, I want to be respectful, but I also want to let you know that, your opinion matters, but at the same time, I don't want you to put me in a box, right? Because while we talked about it in theory, this is now the practice part, and with a tab being perfectly fine with, the situation, because how I've handled and been honest and transparent and open with her with regard to this current relationship, me expanding it is not an issue for me. Basically, she told me, hey, we can talk about it when you think it's worth talking about. But the way that you handle this, I'm fine with not trust your judgment because you haven't given me a reason not to.
In this video, Brodus talks about how Tabitha is perfectly fine with him having other women. How she's so okay with it that him expanding to more women isn't an issue. The defense attorney cross-examined Tabitha about this video. Tabitha denied everything. She said she had no idea about any affair. She didn't know about Latoshia. She didn't know about ethical non-monogamy. She didn't give him permission for anything. But there were more videos. In this video, Brodus claims that Tabitha decided to open up the marriage, that she talked to Latoshia, that she asked Latoshia questions about being with him, that she even brought up having a watcher, someone who watches them have sex. The defense attorney asked Tabitha about all of it. Denied. But Brodus had recorded hours of these videos, talking to the women in his Marco Polo group, bragging about his wife's involvement, creating an entire fiction that Tabitha was supportive and aware. After days of testimony, the case went to closing arguments. The prosecution reminded the jury that at the end of the day, Latoshia Daniels walked into that apartment with a gun and killed a man. The defense reminded the jury that Latoshia was a victim, that Brodus Perry used his position as a pastor to prey on a vulnerable woman, that he manipulated her, controlled her, lied to her for 2 years. And when he finally broke her, when he sent that text message ending everything, she wasn't thinking clearly. She wasn't planning murder. November 2025. 6 years after the shooting, the jury finally delivered their verdict. Second-degree murder, not first-degree. The jury believed that Latoshia didn't plan this in advance, that she acted in the moment, but they also believed she was guilty. Count 1, guilty of second-degree murder for killing Brodus Perry, 15 to 25 years. Count 2, guilty of reckless endangerment for shooting Tabitha Perry, 3 to 15 years. Count 3, not guilty on the firearm charge. Sentencing was set for December 17th, 2025. So what do we make of this case? The jury said both. She was guilty, but not of premeditated murder. But there are questions that still don't have answers. The biggest one, Tabitha Perry. She sat on that witness stand and denied everything. She said she had no idea about the affair, no idea about ethical non-monogamy, no idea about the videos. But how? How do you not know for 2 years that your husband is having an affair? How do you not know when he's recording videos discussing it? Some people believe Tabitha truly didn't know, that Brodus was that good at hiding it. Others believe Tabitha knew, that she's lying now to protect her reputation. We may never know the truth, but here's what we do know. Brodus Perry was not the man he pretended to be. He was a pastor who preached about faithfulness while cheating on his wife. He was a therapist who used counseling sessions to seduce vulnerable women. He was a manipulator who lied to everyone in his life. And those lies, they caught up with him in the worst way possible. This case raises uncomfortable questions about faith, power, and accountability. How many other pastors are out there doing the same thing, using their position to manipulate vulnerable women, hiding behind religion while living double lives? How many women are being told that abuse is love, that control is care? And when those women finally break, when they finally can't take the pain anymore, who's really responsible? The law says Latoshia Daniels is responsible. She pulled the trigger, she took a life, and she'll spend the next 15 to 25 years paying for that choice. But Brodus Perry, he'll never be held accountable for what he did, for the lies, for the manipulation, for the damage he caused. His legacy is those videos. His legacy is a dead body on a living room floor. His legacy is a wife who had to sit in a courtroom and hear about all the ways her husband betrayed her. And his legacy is a woman who loved him so much, who was so broken by him that she couldn't see any way out except through violence. Latoshia Daniels is in prison awaiting sentencing. She faces 15 to 25 years for second-degree murder, plus 3 to 15 years for reckless endangerment. If the sentences run consecutively, she could be in prison for up to 40 years. If they run concurrently, she could be eligible for parole in 15. Tabitha Perry survived her gunshot wound. She's moved on with her life, but she had to sit in that courtroom and watch videos of her husband discussing other women. She had to hear testimony about his affairs. Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church released a statement after Brodus' death expressing shock and grief. They acknowledged the rumors surrounding his murder, but offered no further comment. St. Mark Baptist Church in Little Rock also released a statement. Neither church addressed the allegations about Brodus' behavior. And that silence, that's part of the problem. The You Broke My Heart murder trial is over. Latoshia Daniels was convicted. Brodus Perry is dead. Tabitha Perry is trying to move on. But the questions remain. How did a counseling session turn into a 2-year affair? How did a man of God justify lying to his wife, his girlfriend, and his church for years? How did Tabitha Perry not know? And most importantly, could this have been prevented? We'll never know. But what we do know is this: secrets destroy. Lies have consequences. And when you manipulate people, when you break them down, when you use your power to control them, eventually it all catches up. For Brodus Perry, it caught up on April 4th, 2019. For Latoshia Daniels, it caught up in a courtroom 6 years later. And for Tabitha Perry, it's still catching up. Every day she has to live with the knowledge that her husband wasn't who she thought he was. This case is a warning to pastors. Your position is not a license to prey on vulnerable people. Your power is not yours to abuse to victims. If someone is controlling you, manipulating you, making you feel like you can't live without them, get out, get help. And to everyone watching, pay attention to the people in your life. If something feels wrong, say something. If someone seems broken, reach out. Latoshia Daniels will spend the next 15 to 25 years in prison. Brodus Perry is gone, and Tabitha Perry has to live with the aftermath. All because of lies, all because of manipulation, all because a man who called himself a pastor chose power over integrity. And that's the real tragedy of this case. So what do you think? Was Latoshia Daniels a murderer who deserves every year of her sentence? Or was she a victim who finally snapped after years of manipulation? And do you believe Tabitha Perry's story, that she had no idea about any of this? Or do you think she knew and is lying to protect herself? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because this case, it's one that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about faith, love, and justice